When you spend your whole life building something, brick by brick, memory by memory, you start believing it'll stand forever. That house was my forever. Until the day I found out my son sold it without even asking me. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because the sky looked oddly peaceful, painted with soft gold like it didn't know my world was about to crack wide open. I was sipping my tea in the kitchen, watching the birds hop around the old oak tree outside. Everything felt ordinary, too ordinary for what was coming. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, a man in a dark suit stood there with a clipboard and a polite smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Brooks," he said. "I'm here from Maple Realty. Just here to confirm the final inspection before the sale closes this Friday." I blinked, not understanding. "Sale? I think you've got the wrong house, sir." He looked at his paper, confused. "Evelyn Brooks, 224 North Willow Avenue?" "That's right," I said. "Then no mistake, ma'am. The property was sold last week. Your son, Thomas Brooks, signed the papers." For a moment, I didn't feel my heartbeat. The room tilted. I heard my own voice whisper, "What did you just say?" He checked the file again, his smile fading. "Yes, ma'am. The sale's been finalized. We're just here to confirm move out by Friday." Move out. That word pierced deeper than I expected. I stood there gripping the doorframe, trying to breathe as the world blurred around me. After the man left, I called Thomas. He didn't pick up. I called again, then again. Nothing. Finally, after what felt like hours, he sent a text. "Mom, we'll talk tonight. Please don't panic." Panic? My entire life was built inside these walls. Every inch of that house carried the sound of laughter, tears, Sunday dinners, and the echo of my late husband Harold's voice. How could someone, my own son, decide it was no longer mine? That night, Thomas and Grace came by. I was sitting in the living room, the same one where I used to rock him to sleep. The same room where Harold and I danced on our 30th anniversary. When Thomas walked in, he didn't even look guilty. Just tired. "Mom," he began, "before you get upset." "Too late," I interrupted. My voice was shaking, but I wouldn't let it break. "You sold my house, Thomas. Without asking. Without telling me. How could you do that?" Grace reached for his hand, her tone smooth, rehearsed. "Evelyn, it's not what it seems. The market's good right now, and the offer was above value. We thought." "You thought?" I snapped. "You thought what?" "That you could erase 45 years of my life with a pen stroke." Thomas exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Mom, it's complicated. The taxes, the maintenance, your health. We've been worried about you living here alone. The new place we found for you, it's smaller, easier to manage. Near us, near the kids. It's better this way." I stared at him, the boy I raised, the man who once brought me flowers on Mother's Day and said, "I'll always take care of you, Mom." And now his version of taking care of me was selling my home behind my back. "Did you even think to ask me?" I whispered. His silence was my answer. Grace stepped forward, trying to sound gentle. "You'll love the new place, Evelyn. There's a nice community, a garden." I looked straight at her. "A community? I already have one. It's right here. These walls, these memories, they're my community." Thomas finally met my eyes. "Mom, you're being unreasonable. It's done. The money's already in the account. You'll be secure for life." I felt something inside me harden. "Secure? You think money replaces roots, Thomas? Replaces your father's hands in that kitchen, or your laughter in that hallway?" He didn't answer. That night, after they left, I walked through every room. My fingers brushed over the old wallpaper Harold had put up himself. The scuffed floorboards in the hallway where Lily used to ride her tricycle. The smell of lavender in the laundry room, faint but familiar. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Harold built from oak wood, and cried quietly. I hadn't cried like that since the day he passed. But even in my tears, something strange happened. Beneath the pain, a small ember began to burn. Not anger. Not yet. Just something fierce and alive. The next morning, Lily came to visit. My sweet granddaughter. She had her mother's soft eyes, but her father's restless spirit. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, hugging me tight. I forced a smile. "I will be, darling.
Don't you worry about me."
She looked around the house. "Dad said we're moving you closer to us. But you love this house. Why are you leaving?" I hesitated. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions thinking they know best. But that doesn't mean they're right. She frowned. "I don't want you to move."
Neither do I whispered.
After she left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window again. My eyes fell on the rose bushes Harold planted for our anniversary. They were in bloom, pink and stubborn just like him. That's when I decided something quietly inside me. They might have sold my house, but they hadn't sold me. The next day, I visited my old friend Helen Ward, who lived just a few streets away. She'd always been the kind of woman who spoke her mind. Retired nurse, widowed like me, sharp as a tack. When I told her what happened, she slammed her teacup down so hard it rattled. What? Evelyn, that's not just wrong. It's deceitful. You didn't sign anything, did you? No, I said, shaking my head. But it's under his name now. I put him on the deed years ago, after Harold died. I thought it would make things easier if something happened to me. Helen leaned forward. Well, something happened all right. And now you're going to do something too. I sighed. What could I possibly do, Helen? It's done. She smiled, that mischievous glint in her eye. Oh, honey, nothing's ever done. Not when a mother's been betrayed. I chuckled despite the ache in my chest. You sound like Harold. Then maybe it's time you start acting like him, she said. He never let anyone take what was his without a fight. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look, every betrayal. By dawn, I had made up my mind. I wasn't leaving quietly. If my son thought he could decide my life for me, he was about to learn that this old woman still had a few surprises left. If you've ever been underestimated or told you're too old to fight back, wait till you hear what happens next. When I woke up the next morning, the light coming through my old bedroom window didn't feel the same. It used to warm my heart, but now it burned like a reminder that this house, my home, might already belong to someone else. I could still hear Richard's words from last night echoing in my head. Mom, it's done. You'll understand someday. Understand what? That my son, the boy whose first steps I watched in this very hallway, had traded my memories for money? I made breakfast out of habit, even though no one was coming to eat. My hands trembled as I cracked the eggs, and I thought about how Richard used to sit at that same table, his little legs swinging under the chair, smiling at me like I was his whole world. Somewhere between those childhood mornings and this moment, I had lost him. At 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. A tall man in a gray suit stood outside with a clipboard. Mrs. Miller, he asked politely. Yes, I'm from Crestview Realty. I'm here to inspect the property. The buyers want a few photos before closing. I froze. My chest tightened. Closing? What do you mean closing? He flipped a page on his clipboard. Your son, Richard Miller, signed the contract last week. The final paperwork's already processing. I didn't even remember how I got to the chair, but the next thing I knew, I was sitting there, trying to breathe. After the man left, I called Richard. My fingers shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. He picked up after a few rings, his voice flat. Mom, I'm at work. Can we talk later? No, Richard, we talk now. There's a man here taking pictures of my house. Our house.
He sighed.
It's not our house anymore, Mom. The market's high. It's the perfect time to sell. I felt my throat close. And where am I supposed to go? Melissa and I discussed this. You'll stay with us until we figure something out. Figure something out? I whispered. Richard, you didn't even ask me. He stayed silent for a long time. Then he said, Mom, you wouldn't have agreed anyway. You're too attached to the past. Attached to the past, that line cut deeper than any knife. Because that past was my entire life, the place I built with his father before the cancer took him away. Every corner of that house carried laughter, tears, and love. But to Richard, it was just equity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the rocking chair by the window and watched the rain blur the streetlights. I thought about calling my sister in Oregon or maybe my friend Helen, but something inside me said no. I needed to understand what was really going on. The next morning, I went to Richard's place. Melissa opened the door, her smile tight. "Oh, Evelyn, you're here early. Did Richard tell you we're fixing up the guest room for you?" "Yes," I said softly. "He mentioned it." "Good," she said, walking back into the kitchen. "You'll be comfortable here. It's just temporary, of course." Temporary. That word again. Like I was luggage waiting to be shipped. Richard came downstairs, adjusting his tie. "Mom, I have a meeting. We'll talk later, okay?" But I stood in his way. "No, we'll talk now. Mom, you sold the house.
Why?
You knew how much it meant to me." He rubbed his forehead. "Mom, please. It's complicated. We had some debts."
Debts.
I asked, my stomach turning. "What debts, Richard?" He looked away. Melissa's eyes darted toward him, then away from me. That told me everything. "Mom, it's not what you think. We just needed the money. Melissa's investment fell through, and..." "Investment," I said, my voice trembling. "You sold my home for an investment?" Melissa stepped forward. "It wasn't just an investment, Evelyn. It was a chance for us to build something new. You always talk about how hard life is. We're just trying to make it easier." I stared at her, this woman who smiled sweetly but spoke with knives. "You think selling a mother's home makes life easier? For whom?" Richard's voice rose. "Mom, please stop making me feel guilty for doing what's right for my family." "I am your family," I whispered. "Or did you forget that?" The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush the air between us. Then Lily walked in, rubbing her eyes, her small voice breaking the tension. "Grandma, are you crying?" I knelt beside her and wiped my tears. "No, sweetheart, just a little tired." That night, as I lay in the guest room, I overheard Richard and Melissa arguing downstairs. Their voices were low, but I could catch fragments. "Told you she wouldn't take it well. We had no choice, the loan. What if she finds out about the second account?" My heart pounded. Second account? What were they hiding? The next morning, I waited until they left for work, then went through the kitchen drawer where Melissa kept the mail. My hands trembled as I opened a letter addressed to Richard, from a bank I'd never heard of. It was an overdraft notice for a joint account. The balance was negative $38,000. My knees nearly gave out. What had they done? By evening, Richard came home, looking exhausted. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter in my hand. "Want to tell me what this is?" He froze, color draining from his face. "Where did you get that? Answer me." "It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" I said bitterly. "Because it looks like you used my house to cover your mistakes." Melissa stepped in quickly, her tone sharp. "Evelyn, please, you're overreacting. We needed liquidity for a short-term trade. It'll bounce back." "Trade?" I repeated. "You mean gambling?" Richard's eyes flickered, guilt shining through for a second before he looked away. It was supposed to be temporary. And now? He had no answer. Something inside me hardened that night. The kind of quiet anger that doesn't scream. It just waits. Later, as everyone slept, I walked out to the porch, looking at the dark sky. My heart hurt, yes, but there was also something else rising within me, clarity. I wasn't just some old woman waiting to be moved around. I had built that house brick by brick beside my husband. I had raised Richard under that roof. And if they thought I'd just disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. As the wind rustled the trees, I whispered to myself, "You took my home, Richard, but you forgot who taught you to stand." That night, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd go back to my house, not as a victim, but as its true owner. Because there was something Richard didn't know. Something I had never told anyone. And when he found out, it would change everything. The next morning, I returned to the house that was no longer mine. The for sale sign was already gone, replaced by a new one that said sold in bold, red letters. My chest tightened as I stared at it. That red wasn't just ink, it felt like blood. I stood on the porch and ran my fingers over the old wooden railing. The paint was chipped, but I remembered the day Richard helped his father repaint it. He was 9 years old, giggling as he splashed more paint on himself than on the wood. "We're fixing it for Mommy," he'd said. And now he'd sold it without a blink. But as I turned my gaze toward the attic window, I remembered something I'd hidden there 20 years ago, something that could change everything. When my husband, George, was sick, he'd insisted we add my name as sole owner on the property deed, not both of ours. "Just in case," he'd whispered. I didn't understand why back then. But now, standing there with betrayal burning in my chest, I finally did. I walked to the back door. The spare key was still under the loose brick. My hand trembled as I turned it, half afraid the lock would have been changed already. But it clicked open. I stepped inside, the smell of dust and faint lavender filling my nose. My house still recognized me. Everything was still there. The ticking clock, the photo frames, the wooden table with the tiny scratch Lily made last Christmas when she tried to cut her gingerbread. But something felt colder. Upstairs, I opened the old cedar chest. My hands moved through yellowed letters, George's Army medals, and finally, the folder I'd been searching for, the original deed, and an old letter from our family attorney. My name stood alone on the ownership line. Evelyn Miller. I exhaled a shaky breath. Richard couldn't have sold it legally. Not without forging something. I sat down on the floor, letter trembling in my hand, my mind spinning. My own son had betrayed me so deeply that he'd lied to the government, the bank, and to me. I felt sick, not from anger, but from heartbreak. That evening, when I returned to Richard's home, he was in the living room, laptop open. I stood by the door, clutching the folder to my chest. "Richard," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "Mom, can we not do this again?" I just came from the house. That made him freeze. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. "You went there?" "Yes," I said. "And I found the original deed." His face drained of color. "Mom, don't lie to me, Richard. My name is still on that document. Only mine. You couldn't have sold it without." "Stop," he snapped. "Just stop." "Without what, Richard? Without forging my signature?" The silence that followed was unbearable. His eyes glistened, not with guilt, but with shame. "Mom," he finally said, voice breaking, "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't want you to lose everything if the investment failed. We thought we could buy it back before you found out."
We.
I repeated. He hesitated. "Melissa?" I asked. He nodded. "It was her idea. She said we could make double and then surprise you with the profit." I laughed bitterly.
Surprise-me?
"You call stealing a surprise?" Melissa came out of the kitchen, arms crossed. "You make it sound like we're criminals, Evelyn. We did it for you." "For me?" I said coldly. "You forged my name for me?" Melissa's expression hardened. "You wouldn't understand. Times are different now. You hold on to everything from the past like it's holy. That house is just bricks." "Then maybe you should have built your own," I snapped. The argument spiraled. Voices rose. Words turned into wounds. Lily stood in the hallway, crying silently. I turned to her, my heart breaking all over again. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "go to your room." That night, after the house went quiet, I heard Richard crying in his office. A grown man sobbing like a child. For a moment, my anger softened. Just for a breath. Because no matter what he'd done, he was still my boy. But then, through the cracked door, I saw Melissa's reflection in the glass, whispering sharply, "We can't let her go to the lawyer. She'll ruin everything. I'll handle it." Handle it? The next morning, I woke up to find my folder. The deed, the letter, gone. I tore through my bag, the drawers, everywhere. Nothing. Panic rose in my chest like a storm. I rushed downstairs. "Richard, where is it?" "The folder from my room." "Where is it?" He looked confused. "What folder?" "Don't do this," I said. "Don't pretend." Melissa stepped in, coffee mug in hand. You mean the pile of old papers you left on the counter? I threw them out. They looked like trash. Trash. I shouted. That was my life. My proof. Richard's voice cut in. Melissa, please tell me you didn't. She shrugged. She shouldn't be keeping old junk around. Something inside me broke. I rushed out the door, tears blinding me. I didn't even know where I was going, just away. Away from them, from the walls that suddenly felt suffocating. I found myself back in front of the old house again, standing in the cold. But this time, a moving truck was parked outside. Strangers were carrying out my furniture, my pictures, my husband's chair. I ran to them. Stop. What are you doing? One man looked up. Ma'am, please step back. The new owners asked us to clear the property. New owners. I whispered. Already. He nodded. Sale was finalized yesterday. I stood there, frozen, watching pieces of my life being packed into boxes for strangers to own. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the grass. The world felt blurry, voices echoing, cars passing, but none of it real. One of the movers approached gently. Ma'am, are you okay? I looked at him with empty eyes. My son sold this house, I whispered. He said it was for me. That evening, I wandered to the park across the street, the same park where I used to push Richard on the swings. The same trees, the same wind. Only this time I was alone. I sat on the bench until sunset, clutching an old photograph I'd found in my coat pocket. Me, George, and little Richard, standing right in front of that house. 3 smiles frozen in time. I traced my finger over George's face and whispered, You were right. I should have been stronger. But just as I was about to stand, a voice startled me. Mrs. Miller? It was the realtor who had come to inspect the house earlier that week. I'm sorry to bother you, he said gently, but something's odd about your sale file. I blinked. What do you mean? There's a discrepancy in the signature. The county office flagged it for verification. My heart began to race. Verification. He nodded. If it's confirmed to be forged, the sale might be void. I gripped the edge of the bench. What happens then? They could face serious charges, he said. Forgery is a felony, Mrs. Miller. For the first time in days, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. But as I started to thank him, his phone rang. He stepped aside, answering briefly, his expression changing mid-call. When he hung up, he looked uneasy. I shouldn't say this, but someone just called the agency. They're requesting to finalize and expedite closure paperwork. They used your son's name. The blood drained from my face. Wait, I said slowly. You mean Richard is trying to push it through before the investigation? He nodded grimly. I'm afraid so. For a moment, I couldn't move. My heart wanted to believe there was still goodness left in him. But maybe that goodness had been buried too deep beneath greed and fear. As I walked home under the dim streetlights, I whispered to myself, I gave him everything, even my trust. And he sold that too. That night, sleep didn't come. I sat at the window again, the city lights reflecting in my eyes. I wasn't crying anymore. My tears had turned into something colder, resolve. Because if my son had chosen to betray me, then I would choose something harder, to fight. But what I didn't know was that by the next morning, things would spiral beyond anything I'd imagined. When I woke up, there were police cars outside the house. And that's when I learned someone had reported a fraud case. But not against Richard. Against me. When I opened my front door that morning, the sight nearly stopped my heart. 2 police cars were parked outside, their lights flashing silently in the gray dawn. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains like they were watching the morning's entertainment. I stood frozen on the porch until one of the officers stepped forward. Mrs. Brooks, he asked, we have some questions regarding a property dispute and possible document falsification. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Document falsification? You mean? He nodded. A complaint's been filed against you. It claims you falsified your own signature to prevent the rightful sale of your home. The words hit me like stones. I gripped the doorframe. That's absurd. That's my house. How could I forge my own signature? He exchanged a glance with his partner, clearly uncomfortable. "We just need to get your statement, ma'am." Behind them, I saw Richard standing at the end of the driveway, his hands jammed into his pockets, eyes lowered. Grace stood beside him, sunglasses hiding her expression. The officers led me to the car, and as I sat inside, I looked through the window at my son. I searched his face for a flicker of remorse, for the little boy who once cried when he broke my favorite teacup. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. At the station, they took my statement. My voice trembled, but my words were steady. I didn't forge anything. My husband left that house to me. My son sold it without my permission. I have proof, or at least I did, until those papers went missing. The officer nodded sympathetically. "We'll need to see any original documentation you still have, Mrs. Brooks." That was the problem. The folder, the deed, everything had been taken. When I returned home later that afternoon, Helen was waiting at my door, her arms crossed, her expression sharp. "Good Lord, Evelyn. Half the neighborhood's talking about you getting arrested." I let out a weak laugh. "Not arrested, just questioned. For a crime I didn't commit." She followed me inside. "That son of yours, he's gone too far this time." I sat down on the couch, rubbing my temples. "He filed a complaint, Helen. He accused me of fraud."
Can you believe that?
Helen's eyes widened. "He what?" I nodded. "To protect himself. He thinks if he pins the blame on me, they'll stop looking into his forgery." Helen leaned forward, her voice low. "Then you need to stop being the kind mother who forgives everything. It's time to fight back." Her words struck something in me, a spark that had been buried under layers of love and guilt. That evening, I went to my husband's old study. I hadn't touched it since he passed, but I remembered something. Years ago, he'd mentioned keeping duplicates of important documents in a safe deposit box. At the time, I thought it was unnecessary. But now, my heart began to race with hope. I dug through drawers until I found an old envelope with a faded key and a note in George's handwriting. "For Evelyn. Just in case." I almost cried right there. The next morning, Helen drove me to the First National Bank. The clerk checked the box number and handed me a small steel case. Inside were our marriage certificate, insurance papers, and there it was, another original deed to the house, sealed in plastic, untouched. My hands trembled as I held it. "Oh, George," I whispered. "You saved me." Helen grinned. "Well, would you look at that? You've got your bulletproof proof." We went straight to a lawyer Helen recommended, a retired legal bulldog named Samuel Clark. His office smelled like old books and coffee. I handed him the deed, the letters, everything. He adjusted his glasses and said, "Mrs. Brooks, if what you're saying is true, your son is in serious trouble. Forgery, misrepresentation, fraudulent sale, that's jail time." I felt both sick and vindicated. "I don't want to see him in jail," I said softly. "I just want my home back. And I want the truth out." Samuel nodded. "We'll start there. But be ready. This won't be quiet." That night, I returned to Richard's house. When I walked in, Grace was on the couch, pretending to scroll through her phone. Richard looked up from the dining table, startled to see me. "Mom," he said quickly, "I didn't expect." "You filed a fraud case against me," I interrupted.
Why?
He rubbed his face. "Because I had to. If I didn't, the agency was going to come after me." Grace said. "Don't you dare blame her again," I snapped. "You had a choice." Grace stood, crossing her arms. "He did have a choice to save his family. You think this world runs on sentiment and stories? We needed that money, Evelyn. You're sitting on assets while we're drowning in debt." I stared at her, feeling my heart harden. "So, you destroy your family to save it?" She smirked faintly. "Welcome to reality." I walked closer to Richard, my voice trembling but firm. "I went to the bank today. Found your father's safe deposit box." He froze. "I have the original deed," I said quietly, "with my name on it.
No forgeries.
No lies." Grace's smirk vanished. "And tomorrow," I continued, "I'm meeting with my lawyer. He's filing a report with the county and the police. Every document you touched will be re-examined. So, if you have anything left to confess, now's the time. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Richard's eyes. He looked at Grace, then back at me. Mom, please. Don't do this. I shook my head. You already did. I turned to leave, but his voice cracked behind me. I just wanted to make you proud. That stopped me. I turned, tears blurring my vision. Then you should have remembered who you came from. I walked out, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing like a lifetime ending. The next week was chaos. Lawyers called. The police reopened the investigation. The county put a hold on the property transfer. The new owners were furious, but sympathetic when they learned the truth. Then came the day of the confrontation. The bank, the realtor, the lawyer, and Richard were all summoned to a review hearing. I walked into that courthouse with Helen by my side. Richard sat across the table, pale and silent. Grace wasn't there. She'd left 2 days earlier, taking Lily to her mother's house. When the investigator displayed the forged documents on the screen, the room went silent. Side by side, they compared my true signature from the bank with the one on the sale agreement. The difference was glaring. The investigator looked directly at Richard. Mr. Brooks, do you wish to explain how your mother's forged signature appears on this contract? Richard's lips trembled. I didn't know. The realtor handled. But Patrick Miles, the realtor, slammed his folder shut. Don't drag me into this, Richard. You told me you had your mother's approval. It turned into chaos, voices rising, blame flying. I sat still, my heart aching for what was left of my family. Finally, the judge called for silence. Mrs. Brooks, he said gently, you are hereby reinstated as the legal owner of the property. Further proceedings will determine charges against the parties responsible for this fraud. It was over, at least legally. But in my heart, nothing was truly over. Afterward, Richard followed me outside. He looked broken, his shoulders hunched. Mom.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean for it to go this far. I looked at him, my son, my betrayer, my child. Sorry doesn't undo what you did, I said quietly. But I don't hate you, Richard. I just don't know you anymore. He wiped his face, voice trembling. What happens now? I looked toward the courthouse doors. Now, I said, justice happens. But after that comes the hardest part, forgiveness. I turned away, walking into the cool evening air. Helen caught up with me at the steps. You okay? She asked. I nodded slowly. I will be. For the first time in a long time, I will be. We stood there watching the sunset over the courthouse. The sky burned orange and pink, a strange beauty after so much pain. And though I'd won the battle for my home, I knew the war inside my heart wasn't finished. Because that night, when I got home, I found a letter slipped under my door. No return address. Just my name, written in Richard's handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. If you go through with this, you'll lose me forever. I sat down, the paper trembling in my hands. The ink blurred as tears filled my eyes. For a long time, I just stared at the words, torn between justice and love, between the mother I'd always been and the woman I'd finally become. The room fell silent. The night outside was still. It was the calm before the final storm. When I stepped out of that courtroom, the cold wind brushed against my wrinkled face, but for the first time in months, I felt warmth inside my chest. The kind of warmth that comes not from victory but from peace. The house was no longer mine, not legally. The judge had ruled that the sale couldn't be reversed. Too many papers, too many signatures. But that day, I realized something that shook me deeper than any loss ever could. That home wasn't just wood and stone. It was love, memory, and the people who honored it. And even if mine had fallen apart, I still had a heart that could rebuild. I remember looking at Ryan, my son, across that empty parking lot. He stood there, pale and quiet, holding a folder of legal documents like a shield he no longer believed in. He couldn't meet my eyes. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just sorrow. The kind of sorrow that mothers carry silently, heavy, invisible, endless. I walked up to him slowly. He flinched, as if expecting my words to cut him. But I just said, "You took my house, Ryan, but you also took something much more fragile, my trust. Do you even understand what that means?" His lips trembled. "Mom, I thought I could fix everything. The debts, the bills, the pressure. I didn't want you to lose everything if." "If what?" I interrupted softly. "If I died." He froze. His eyes widened, because that was the truth behind it all. He had sold the house not out of greed, but fear. Fear of losing me, fear of his own failure. He wanted money for a treatment plan he thought I needed, one I had refused long ago. I turned away, the air biting my throat. "Ryan, I would rather lose every brick of that home than lose you to lies." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how to stop it, Mom. Once I started the paperwork, the buyer, that man, he wouldn't let me back out. He said he'd sue me if I tried to cancel. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could protect you, and that's when I realized, sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from evil. It comes from fear wrapped in love." Weeks passed. I moved into a small cottage by the lake, the one Linda, my old neighbor, had helped me find. It wasn't grand, but every morning, I opened the window, breathed the scent of pine trees, and whispered a little thank you to life. There was peace here, the kind that came without furniture or family photographs. Just me, my tea, and the quiet sound of forgiveness learning to bloom again. But life has a strange way of turning. One evening, I saw Ryan walking up my narrow path. He looked different, thinner, humbler. He was holding something behind his back. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come in?" I nodded. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the little living room that smelled like lavender and would smoke. Then he handed me a small wooden box. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside lay a stack of old photos, a few folded letters, and at the very bottom, a single golden key. "What is this?" I whispered. "It's your house key," he said. "I bought it back." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "What?" He swallowed hard. "I worked day and night, sold my car, took extra shifts. I wanted to fix what I broke. The buyer agreed to sell it back to me, at a loss. He said he'd never met a son who fought so hard to make peace with his mother." Tears blurred my vision. I touched that key as if it were a newborn's hand. But I didn't rush to return. I just smiled faintly and said, "Ryan, maybe you bought the house back. But what matters is you earned something far rarer, redemption." He fell to his knees, his face buried in my lap like a child again.
"I'm sorry, Mom."
"I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." And right there, with his head against my knees and my hands in his hair, I felt the ache dissolve, not all at once, but slowly, like dawn melting frost. The next morning I visited the old house. It looked the same, the faded blue porch swing, the white fence leaning to one side, the rosebush still clinging to life despite neglect. I placed my hand on the doorknob but didn't turn it, because I realized something powerful. I didn't need to live there anymore. That home had already done its job. It had given me memories, love, lessons, and pain, all the ingredients that shape a life worth remembering. Ryan stood beside me silently. I turned to him and said, "Keep it. Build your own story here. Let your children laugh on that porch like you once did. Just promise me one thing. Never trade love for money again. It's a bad bargain that always costs more than it gives." He nodded, eyes shining with tears. "I promise." We stood there, two souls bound not by walls or inheritance, but by forgiveness. Months later, I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping older women who'd lost their homes to greedy relatives, bad contracts, or blind trust. Every time I told my story, they'd look at me with disbelief, not because it was sad, but because it was true. And I'd tell them this: you can rebuild a house, but you can't rebuild a heart until you forgive the ones who cracked it. Now, when I sip my morning tea and the sun paints gold on the lake, I whisper a prayer not for what I lost, but for what I found: strength, peace, and the courage to let go. Because maybe, in the end, Losing that house was the only way I could come home to myself. Sometimes God takes away your shelter, so you can finally learn to live under your own sky.